Welcome to Slated for Tomorrow.
It's a podcast where we bring in inspiring guests who use their passion, superpowers to shape the future. Joining us today is Greg Gottesman. Welcome.
Who are you, though?
I'm the host, Sandy Sharma, and you are?
James Archer, your other co-host.
Please, tell us about yourself.
I am 53. I currently run and manage a startup studio and venture capital fund called Pioneer Square Labs here in Seattle. And I've been in the venture entrepreneurial ecosystem for 25 plus years, building companies, investing in companies, starting companies, and it's a lot of fun. I also been teaching for 23 years at the University of Washington, entrepreneurship. Just finished that class. I have 3 kids. I'm an empty nester, a new empty nester.
Welcome.
A lot of change, but I'm really enjoying this the various chapters that you get to experience as you sort of grow older, hopefully a little bit wiser, and still have time to do great work and have some fun.
Awesome. Well, by the way, he's being extremely humble here. He's one of our foundational pillars for the startup ecosystem here in the Northwest, and started Rover.com, which is extremely successful, managing director at Madrona, and you've done a lot for the community, so thank you. We really appreciate that.
You know, we're going to get into your passion and your purpose and superpower, why'd you want to start a company? Why were you so frustrated with, obviously, the friction that Rover solved? But I would love, in 140 characters or less, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, because you coach entrepreneurship?
I do.
That people make when wanting to start a company, like a startup, because I'm pretty sure you've seen it all in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, they make a lot of mistakes. I think the number one mistake would be not talking to customers, not really doing the customer validation. It's so easy now to get a tremendous amount of data from Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and be able to do real customer validation about an idea relatively inexpensively and easily, and yet so few people really go and do the hard work of or the important work of figuring out before you start writing code, before you start building a product, before you start raising money, is there a business here? At PSL, Pioneer Square Labs, which is the studio and fund that I'm a part of, we kill over 90% of the ideas we start. Wow. And most of that is just simple customer validation, talking to customers, setting up landing pages, web pages, and seeing what people think. And most of the time, our intuitions are not right. Even after all these years, we just learn so much from talking to customers, and that's the number one thing I think people don't do enough when they're starting a company.
And it's not just in the beginning, right? That journey continues.
Not just in the beginning. And of course, it's directional. Even if you get really positive resonance with customers, ultimately putting up something, getting them to pay is a barrier as well. And so you have to keep honing and perfecting. I like to say that really trying to figure out what you can be best in the world at for a very narrow segment of customers initially, so you can get that early traction. We can spend more time talking.
Yeah. And I love that. I'll even add into that. One of the advice I got from a serial entrepreneur like yourself was people focus so much on trying to solve the everything problem. And instead, I love that you say first go narrow. And even in the narrow, especially if it's an app, what's the day one stickiness? Because I was told if it takes multiple interactions with your app to get value, that is not going to work. Right. So I love that you took us there.
I think you nailed it. I think the one thing I will say to our entrepreneurs, or in this course that I teach, is narrow, especially early. That's not what your vision is.
Yeah, of course not.
That's not the mountain that you ultimately want to climb, but it's where you start. Your go-to-market needs to be exceedingly narrow, so you can really hone in on some problem that you can be best in the world at solving.
And you did say, by the way, that there is some stickiness that happens, but you very quickly followed by, is there a business there, right? Stickiness might be okay. So is, in your opinion, freemium just out? Or is that not a path? Or what do you still think about it? There is a way to make money.
I think freemium can be a wonderful model to the extent that there's the emium part of it, right? And so
What is emium? Can you, just for the audience that may not be familiar?
yeah, the freemium model is where you essentially offer. It's the model, for example, that most games use now. So you can play the game, but then if you want to have certain kinds of items that within the game, then you're going to purchase that. If you want to sort of level up in certain kinds of ways, you may purchase, and that's the way they make money. So they want to get as large of an audience as possible, and then monetize that small percentage of people who are willing to pay. I think that can be a model that can work. I think the problem is that a lot of content, information type sites, feel like okay, we'll put it out there, we'll get a lot of users, and ultimately they'll pay, and a lot of times that doesn't happen. And so, understanding if you're going to do a freemium model that there is a path toward where folks are going to pay is really important.
I'm going to read a quote from you.
Okay.
Venture is about finding truly great entrepreneurs and supporting their efforts in every possible way. The rest is noise. So how do you define a great entrepreneur?
Some of the similar qualities that they have, I think self-awareness is an underestimated quality. Why is self-awareness so important for an entrepreneur? Because great entrepreneurs have a deep understanding of their strengths and weaknesses. And in some ways, if you have a deep understanding, I was explaining this to an entrepreneur yesterday who was telling me that he wanted to go and continue to build a skill set in an area of weakness that he knew was an area of weakness. And when I was explaining to him, as I said, sometimes great entrepreneurs, for example, if they're self-aware and realize they have a weakness, they just hire for that, or they fill that hole. And so again, great entrepreneurs have a good sense of where they sort of are uniquely great and where they can where they're going to need to fill holes around them. I think great entrepreneurs are great storytellers. Not all in the same way. Not everyone needs to be, up on stage, great storytelling, but they are able to inspire and tell a story to customers.
Good one.
To potential employees, to investors, to themselves. And I think that's another underrated quality. And then, of course, you need grit, and you need some smarts, and you need some domain experience.
Entrepreneurs, like you said, instead of trying to strengthen and spend all that time and that energy to get 1% better in that weakness, they should hire or outsource for. Do you think AI is helping with that, accelerate that now, and it's kind of making more equal of a playing field?
I think it could. I don't know if it's quite yet at that point to where it's filling holes. But for example, I think already people are using it to write better documents, to do better research. And then I think over time it will fill holes for folks. But I don't think it's ever going to replace some of the things that humans can do uniquely well. And so even if, so for example, a great team, we talked about Rover. One of the great teams here locally is Aaron Easterly and Brent Turner. And I've said, and to both Aaron and Brent, I think the best decision we ever made at Rover, and I was the initial CEO, then Aaron, who really led the company and has led the company to its great success. But he came to me and said, hey, there's a wonderful person that I used to work for named Brent Turner. And he essentially said he fills a bunch of holes for me. He's a day-to-day operator, manager in a way that
I cannot be. Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to stretch to hire that person. And I'm telling you, I don't think Rover would be as successful as it is. That was the most important decision we made. Thanks to Aaron for having that self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And thanks to Brent for, again, being that sort of partner to Aaron as they built that company into something great.
We talked about startups, talked about entrepreneurs a little bit. I just want to, for some of our folks who have not yet put their toe in the water, to be an entrepreneur, just to, two things. One is, in broad strokes, just share the typical life cycle of a company in realistic terms.
So most startups are not go raise millions of dollars and try to take this to the moon. Most startups are maybe you raise a little bit of money, or maybe you don't. Maybe you bootstrap it, and those can be fantastic businesses that, again, can generate real income. And so those are exciting. In terms of the world in which we live in for venture-backed startups, oftentimes you are starting with an idea and then you're out trying to raise enough money to be able to go and make some hires. And it can take, we used to say it would take 6-7 years before an exit, but I think it's more like 10 years now before you really get liquidity or some kind of exit. And again, you're going to go through cycles where right now we're in a down cycle where it's very, very difficult to raise money.
Yep.
And other times you might be in a cycle where it's easier, but you're going to go through in the life of a startup several ups and downs. It's going to be different than you first planned. It's going to be harder than you could have ever imagined. And it's probably going to be, to the extent that you embrace that, a lot more fun and your most exhilarating business experience of your life.
As you said, the fundamentals of knowing what the customers find sticky, finding for it to be viable as a business. What tips do you have for people to stay on that course more than just the classic course of, let me just raise the next round of money? I mean, you kind of see that. Do you see that as a divergent thing, or do you see them actually align well? What are your tips there?
Well, there's this thing called product market fit that most companies are really trying to get to. And product market fit is where you're really getting those customers to start pulling. And when you have product market fit, that let's say you put in $1, $2 are going to come out of this machine that you started to create. And that's what you're trying to aim for, is this product market fit. Finding product market fit, very, very hard and difficult. Most companies fail before they get there. And again, the way to find it, I think initially, is you're just talking to as many people as you can, not worrying about, is someone going to
not like your idea
or like your idea and try to take it from you. I think that's another, people are very fearful that someone's going to steal my idea if I share it. And my sense is it's better to get the feedback, because in the end, the ideas are this is about execution. And so you usually get a lot more value from the feedback than the risk you're going to take of potentially sharing an idea with someone that usually won't, but might potentially start something similar.
What I'm hearing, a passion of yours, is not just start and correct us and guide us in this, is you love building things, and clearly you have a passion for helping others, or else you wouldn't be a teacher. Right. Is that a fair assessment of one of your passions?
It is. If you look at the last handful of companies that I've helped to start or found, one is in the immigration space that I felt there was a problem that needed to be solved. It's called Boundless, and it's one of the largest digital immigration companies in the world. Another just announced its funding today, called Evergreen, which is in the climate space. Another is in the pet space, which I care a lot about. One was around called June, around teen mental health. Another area that I care a lot about. Another called Kavala was in the sort of the healthcare and nursing space. Again, another important area. So I do feel like you can create companies that do well and do good, and those give me the most satisfaction.
It's a bigger purpose, right?
And I think those are easier to get right now. Those are also easier to get funded, because people are sort of, if you're just building another server blade or another widget, I think it's harder to break through the noise.
Tell me about the green one, the
Evergreens.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Oh, Evergreen is a great, again, a great new startup that is focused on enabling corporate players to be able to invest intelligently in renewable energy projects, right now solar projects. We've got to, by order to 2 orders of magnitude, increase the amount of renewable energy that we produce. And Evergreen has a platform that enables corporate dollars to come and cost effectively, smartly invest in
those projects
and be able to get the highest return possible from that investment.
Listen, this is, I think, the dichotomy between government and private sector. they have to be heck efficient in the private sector. If their money is going in, we need to be like, and the innovation in this technology has to go a lot faster to go to scale, right?
And you want to slim down the overhead as much as you can.
And I love that. This is where the real innovation is coming from. There's that other podcast, right? Chamath and those guys, and they were actually really calling that out. It's ironic that people that want to fix this are the ones that are obviously here living, and they have the money and the means to do that. So I love that y'all have done that, and you've reduced the headache for companies that have all this extra cash. They want to inject it. I think if you were to ask an employee, like, hey, would you all like to help contribute some of our investments towards making renewable energy more accessible to everyone? No one's not going to raise their hand.
Yeah. I think this is they have a platform that's a win-win. There's this new bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically a climate bill, enables companies to get up to 70% of a solar project paid for through a tax credit.
And that's where the government can play in innovation.
In a massive, that is a radical change. And the reason why I think there hasn't been as much solar build is because, frankly, the economics weren't there. You were talking single-digit type returns, and now you can get significantly higher returns. I think that should lead to more investment, and that's where sort of evergreen
so even the
plays.
credit for the utility getting you credit back for what you pump back into the grid, right? Why isn't enough of that happening, though? I still get surprised by it.
I think the reason is because the returns weren't there, and that's why this new bill, and they're still clarifying some of the sections.
Is it just economic?
I think a lot of it is economic. And there's not, so look, consumers, we've done a lot of testing, and this consumers want to participate, but let's say I say to you, Sandy, go and put your money where your mouth is, go invest in solar. What would you do?
Right. We don't know where to go, where to start.
Where do you go? It's difficult. So same with corporations that, unless you're the Googles or the Microsofts who can sort of afford to buy
and build the platform,
and build it themselves, you're stuck. And again, that's why I think you need some of these startups like Evergreen who create a platform that enable everyone to be able to participate in the same way that Google's and the Microsofts are. That's and then ultimately consumers as well.
I love that we went down that route from an educational standpoint. One, first off, for the audience, is Evergreen hiring? If they go to the website,
ever.green. And then PS, we've got a bunch of companies at PS.
I love that. During the massive layoffs, I actually did a whole list of saying, people think the only companies that hire are Google's and Microsoft's, but there are a lot of very well-funded startups, whether they're with y'all or other venture-backed.
And have great missions.
Yes.
That have great missions and that you can really sink your teeth into, again, doing well and doing good. Those are hard to find, but those could be really special.
So speaking of those, in terms of doing good, emotional and physical well-being, right? During COVID, I think a lot of us went through ups and downs and kind of also had the realization that that's a very important part of my life, my family's life. Tell us about some of the companies you started to mention there and your own passion in that space. Is that something that...
I have a very significant passion in that space. I had a close friend who was one of the most exceptional people on the planet, extremely successful career-wise, had a wonderful young family. And I met with him about less than 48 hours before he took his life. And I didn't see it. No one did. And in his note, he said he just said some things that I wish I could have helped him, obviously suffering. But I remember in our offices, and we were talking about our next startup. We had built a startup together and sold it. We were talking about the next one that we would do. And he lingered by the elevator. And I think he was, and this is in my own mind, but I think he was contemplating, and I went back to my desk. We have an open office. I think he was contemplating whether he was going to share something with me. And he stood for about 5 minutes and didn't press the down button. So I got up, went and pressed the down button, patted him and said, I can't wait to start another company with you. Very transactional. I think about that a lot. And I think this kind of problem of people feeling lonely, feeling depressed, feeling anxious is much more pervasive, even among people that seem like him.
They seem fine. Yeah.
More than fine, like everything couldn't be going better. And so as part of that, I really felt it was important that I wanted to do something in the mental health space.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way.
Started this company called Joon, Joon, which is focused on teen mental health. And I think there's even a bigger problem than people want to admit exists. And what Joon does is it provides therapists who are specialized in anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, gender identity, some of these issues that teens are struggling with even more since the pandemic. And it's doing exceptional work, and I'm really, really proud of that company. I hope that company, because that's one where, it's hard. That's a hard one because Joon is doing incredible work, and our results are, and it's teletherapy. Mm-hmm. Our results are extraordinarily good, much better than in-person therapy because of that specific kind of person. So if you are a young kid, there's a lot of issues around having your parents drive you to therapy. Maybe you're going to see someone you don't want to see walking in, or maybe when you come out, your parent says, well, what'd you guys talk about? When what you talked about was your parent because you're having real difficulty with that.
This is just private and safe.
And so this modality of being able to do it over the phone has been immensely successful in terms of the results. But it's one of those ones where it's hard to get virality because no one wants to talk about it. There still is. I don't care what people say. There's still a shame. There's still a little bit of a stigma associated with especially among people our age and parents around talking about these issues. And until that changes, I think we'll struggle to get people sometimes the help.
And you know what's sad? Some of it might have been caused by social media itself.
Yeah. There's totally direct, yeah.
And then how do you use that same medium to have the strength to stand up and speak out? In fact, it's almost if somebody actually did, there'd be many more people who probably come forth. It's a tough one.
There's a couple of things because I love that they've identified the medium of once you get them to be on. I think one of the biggest problems is, and especially with the U.S. suicide hotline too, I think they said that they're just so understaffed that there's some crazy stat, like 40% of all calls that people make don't get even answered. Yeah, it's a scary stat because here people are told to rely on the system.
And they actually pick up the phone and call.
And they call and they're waiting for you need to have immediate response in that moment of need, right? Because it's like a life or death thing. Like
there's a real problem. I have 3 children in college, and I know that at those colleges, even well-funded colleges, there can be waiting times of a month, 2 months to get in and see a therapist.
Can't wait that long.
Companies like Joon can help. We know the data's there.
How to get the word out?
How do we get sort of the more efficient and the better ones sort of to folks in need? And it really is an issue. I just at one of my children's colleges, we just got a note about another suicide, and it's an epidemic among young people. And I think we need to do better, and we can do better.
You know, it's funny. So I'm gonna be real too. So I almost took my life once, actually, which is kind of funny because if you know me, you're like, that's the funny stigma. People are like, wow, this guy's so gregarious. He's extroverted. He's like the life of the room. How could that be the case? And I was just I'd gone through a massive breakup. I just ended an engagement. I thought this was going to be the future. I was 28 at the time. And for my first time in my life, I had panic attacks. I never had that in my life, right? So like the skin itches, it's on fire. I couldn't sleep. I was getting an hour of sleep a day for 12 days, right? Each day. So the problem is, it's not that like I wanted to.
No, you just spiral out of control.
But when you don't get sleep and when you get super anxiety, your body ends up betraying you because you're not thinking properly necessarily. Like this was at least my case. Every case is different. I know that much. But like I started spiraling into where I just was like, okay, I don't want to live like this anymore. And I was like, probably the easiest thing to do is just walk out on the street, cross outside and just finish. Like I actually had that thought and I was like, I could do that. And luckily, I had that 19-year-old Tanmay, he saved my life because I was supposed to go to Canada that week to go see him for a group project. I was his unofficial big brother. And I said to myself, I was like, I don't want to let him down. It had nothing to do with my parents or anyone else.
That is amazing.
I was like, this little kid, this young man is looking to him as his big brother. And I said to myself, I was like, okay, I got to pull up my big point. Either I end it or I snap out of it.
You got to be there for him.
Yeah. So
that's good.
Sorry. That's, that.
No.
Not a lot of people know that story about me.
Thanks for sharing that.
Sorry.
No, thanks for sharing.
But I think in this startup world that we live in, the tech world, mental health is a much bigger issue than people want to admit. I'm touched by your story. Sorry, but there are people that can help, and I think we owe it. I think talking about it like you just did,
that is the part that takes strength. Yeah.
So people can hear, because I think a lot of times people feel like they're the only ones going through it.
Yeah.
But during COVID, I think it was so bad.
Isolated. I feel so bad for children. They're not getting the social interactions and the richness. Like us as adults, I think they said that as adults we're more elastic because we had the connections already. These children who literally go to school in their transformative years to build and grow, they're cut off from the world for like 2 years.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about this? The physical connection. I think we discussed it in another podcast too. When you talk about a team and they come together and they huddle and put their arms around each other, right? So there's chemical reactions that happen in your body that make you feel safe and trusted and secure and be able to rely on each other. Now you move apart, and during COVID, we were not seeing anybody physically.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're an extrovert, introvert, what your personality is, we all draw energy from each other. And the vibes that we talk about, those are real. Yeah. You cannot replace that with the best video conferencing system or anything else. So that part, I think, went away. And as you were walking in here, Greg, we were talking about like back to office kind of thing. And I do want to go down that path because it's an interesting topic for all of us. So Adam Smith era, Industrial Revolution, the clocking of hours, supervisors there, and time clocks, all that made sense for that era. We know it's not that anymore. We're not making widgets. However, where does the world go now? And what is the new normal? And where do you see your bias, especially when you're running a studio, right? And people are coming in and innovating. To tell us about that.
Well, we struggle with it. I think there is, when you're generating new ideas, especially early on, the best ideas don't come from meetings or from a Zoom call. I've never had a great idea on a Zoom come from a Zoom call. They come from the time you spent bumping into
the hallway moments.
Like that great John Lennon quote, like life is what happens to you when you're making other plans. It's like, it's the in-between moments, those collisions that really lead to the best innovations, ideas, and I think we miss that with people being at home. I also feel like we talked about mental health. There was something about all of us being together in that context and working, and I think that was positive. So I think the pendulum during the pandemic swung one way. I think it swung too far, and I think it's got to come back, and maybe there's some kind of hybrid that can work, but this idea of all remote to me, I don't think it addresses, at least for our business, I don't think it addresses some of the key innovation elements.
So I'm just going to be devil's advocate just to kind of get this going a little bit. We saw stats that companies that supported this had 25% less attrition and had 35% higher productivity.
There are certain kinds of jobs and certain kinds of people that I think can work well remotely. And then there are certain kinds of jobs and certain kinds of people that
You need the engagement.
that benefit from the engagement. I think we're doing an entire generation a massive disservice when you're starting out and you're trying to get some mentorship, you're trying to learn, you need apprentices, even if it's not formal, the mentorship that you get, the speed of interaction so you're not going down the wrong... For young people especially, I think it's important to be around, or can be important to be around other folks.
that are similar, young, and have similar ambitions.
When you're early and you have a small team, I think it is important to have those interactions. Can there be some types of work and other things where you can do it remotely? Sure. And some, like, let's say I have a day and I'm going to be on Zoom calls all day. I'm going to be more effective being at home. That's fine. But most days I come into the office because I feel like I can be around the team. I can be, we can talk about ideas for the kind of work that I love to do, which is coming up with new ideas, starting companies, looking for product market fit. I think that's better done in person.
So I'm going to put a couple things out there to support that. I would say, and then it also kind of goes a little bit different. It really comes down to the personality of the people. Like, they talk about employee dynamics. You really you have to have a good mix of your introverts and your extroverts, because a lot of times the introverts are the ones that are they're building, and the extroverts are the ones that are creating the fabric that connects the other people. They're the ones that are initiating the meeting after the meeting, right? And I think a perfect example was I went to the Google office recently, and I'm not supposed to be necessarily, I don't have a space because I'm sales. I'm at the customer site. If not, I can be working from home. I like the free food. So, that brings me in.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I saw someone and we had a similar moment. We laughed at a situation, and then I asked him, what team are you on? What do you do? Turns out he's a TPM, built a new product, is looking for guidance on a go-to-market strategy. He's like, we struggle billing people out to sales. I was like, I'm your target audience. I can coach you on that. But that only initiated because I asked him. A lot of times, I can tell you, I am in these elevators. Literally, people are looking down at their feet. And so that doesn't help you necessarily if they're in the office. I think that's why when you interview, and I know people talk about, like, people like myself, we do unfortunately overpower a room. That's why there's good coaching for us. Like, I think that's why design thinking is an awesome training tool for your people, because it teaches you to not be the loudest person in the room, to be the person that asks you the questions. So that's one. And then I would say I had then I'd go back to the thing about, you brought up networking, and I'm a huge champion of that. My whole career is because I told you about my LinkedIn job I got because of the power of networking. My Microsoft job, the power of networking. I never once did a job portal to get these. It was always hustling, maintaining relationships, delivering, and proving, next phases. And for me, I would say it's even easier to get a meeting with a senior level executive nowadays, because they're maybe not...
He's right about that. Re-engaging, everybody's been lonely. Like, I'll take a meeting.
During COVID, how many CVPs I could get lined up at Microsoft because they weren't traveling anymore? and I think it comes down to helping encourage that outside. And that's why I mentor people with this one quote. It's you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And the answer is always no if you don't ask. That's my life mantra. And I try to teach that to the younger generation, because I feel like if they feel empowered, then there you go. Like, it really, anyways, it's easier said than done. I grew up very different. Like, I grew up on a farm. I learned how to have to be independent. Like, these are the types of things that...
To close out on that topic, though, what would your ideal future be on that in terms of work, how we work? Just for Pioneer Square Labs, maybe.
I think it's a hybrid approach leaning heavily towards in-person because of the energy, just the goodness that gets created when we're together working to solve a problem on a whiteboard. hard to replace that over Zoom. So I'd like to see us move towards, again, allowing people that for certain times and days, certainly go do the work remotely. You have the freedom to, but the default to come in, and so most days you're in the office. I think that's where we should head.
And this office that we're sitting in now, we redesigned the entire office to be that first. That could it be inviting for people to come over and actually collaborate, meet, interact. As you've noticed as you walked around, it isn't just cubes. That's not what we're trying to do, right? So because we want to do more of that.
Like if I worked for you, I would want to come in here because just the environment feels. And that's, I think, the first thing that you could do. I think one of the mistakes that one of the large beverage companies in Pacific Northwest did, and I'm not going to say the name, but you know who I'm alluding to, they originally, during COVID, redesigned their whole corporate HQ to be spaces just for collaboration, right? Totally, I get that. But then their former now CEO left, and he's like, no, everyone has to be in the office on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and guess what? They're 1,100 desks short for everyone to be in. And so now you actually can't be productive because people are like literally banging on the doors.
Forcing is not working either though, right? Lots of people tried that. So you have to find your mojo as your company.
You incentivize them in, and not everyone can do what Google did, and not everyone can do what Microsoft did because they're not all SaaS-based, super high profit margins, where Google literally says, hey, you like our dinners? We guarantee you dinners Monday through Wednesday. Breakfast, Monday through Friday. But if you notice, if you go in, I'll be more willing to host you guys. You come in, it is packed. And they still do socials. They do Thursdays, they do a TGIF, thank God it's Friday, but they do socials on a Thursday, and at 5 o'clock in the cafeteria, and it is bumping. And I think, to your point, it's about leaders first have to build the culture for why people want to go into the office with them.
Sounds like free food first.
Yeah, yeah.
Just kidding.
Let me share something that I tell our CEOs, or the ones that I work with, and I've said this for a few years now. Most people that are leading companies play the role of CEO.
Mm-hmm.
They read a book about what it is to be a CEO. They ask other people. They try to do what they think CEOs should do or ought to be doing. For most companies, it's not so I would say be the CEO. So for your particular company and the people that you have employed and the mission that you have and the goals that you need to accomplish, how do you sort of set up a work environment, a remote versus in office? How do you set it up in a way that works for your company and your unique? Because you can say, well, what are other people doing? And that can be informative, but that shouldn't be definitive, right? You need to sort of figure out what's going to work for your company, for your situation.
And it's going to be different.
And be the CEO. Don't act the CEO job. And I think that's where, and that goes for a lot of things. But you've got to figure out, for example, what's going to work here for you, or I have to figure out what's going to work
totally
for
different.
us. And that may be totally different than what Microsoft or Google is going to do.
If I may, I'm going to indulge a little bit into this one because it's interesting. Earlier you talked about customer discovery and meeting with customers and listening to them and understanding what they really want, right? So in the philosophy of doing just improvement or innovation on anything, there is this concept of what people want and need, and then what they are feeling and thinking. The magic happens with the feeling and thinking, because wanting and needing is logical. Feeling and thinking is what becomes emotional, and where the trust is or the distrust is, and where the bonds get built. And you can only know the feeling and thinking if you're investing time in building those bonds and relationships. So you could always justify yourself, oh, we thought these were the 17 things customers wanted and needed, and we prioritized them, and here they are, and that's what we're going to go after and build in our next feature set. And you do. But then when you launch it and the way it works, if the authenticity or the connection or how you're treating them is bad, then you still won't get the desired outcome. So similarly for the people you work with. In a startup or even a slightly bigger company, you can easily understand what people are feeling and thinking if you're actually paying attention to it. So the way you speak, the way you interact, what you're asking, are you authentic or not? So if you read that book on being CEO and you're trying to replicate it here, everybody across the room can tell this is not Sandy, right? This is not real. So I think that's where, to me, the crux of it, and I call it the karma of feeling and thinking. That's what always comes back at you in your personal relationships, professional relationships, and that's it. And it's not that we don't have an ability to check that pulse. We are generally not in that mode. If you get into the mode, it's very telling. So that's just something that I found was, very useful in situations. So I don't know. That's karma of feeling and thinking.
No, I think, what is that? Is it a Maya Angelou quote that says, people don't remember what you say, they remember
But how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, and I think that even goes back to like the principle of, design thinking is your customer remembers the last experience that they had with your product.
Yes.
Right? Whether it was a good or bad, and maybe they had 5 great interactions, but if the last one was a bad one, like I'm pretty sure if I asked you, did you have a bad experience with a product recently? You might remember it, because like more people are willing to go write about something being bad than be like, oh, I'm going to voluntarily write a positive review, right? Because I don't know what it is about humans, but we just get so worked up about the it bothered.
I wasn't treated right.
Yeah.
Anyway. Look, I want to switch gears to something else.
I mean, wow, what a conversation. We've gone over your I actually wanted to dig one more step into your passion, because your passion is amazing. Where do you think that originated from? The teaching, we understand the passion for solving for mental health. I love that, and your vulnerability there and sharing that and allowing me to share mine. Where did the teaching though come from? Was your father a teacher to you, mother a teacher to you? Did you have a role model? Like, where did that stem? Do you think? Can you call?
I love the energy that I get from the students. I feel like I get certainly as much or more than I give in that context.
Love that.
And so I think in another life, that was what I did.
Okay.
And so one of the things I feel really grateful for is that I have the ability to be able to, start these companies, invest in companies, work with these incredible entrepreneurs, but also feel some other, passions like teaching and other things. And I've had the ability to do that. And I'm really lucky in that way. But I think it's always been something that, again, I did it. So I went to a lot of school and then I that could have been a path that or a road not taken. And so I've been able to kind of feel a little bit of that.
Okay. So self-discovery as a passion. I love that. Like, I'd like to tell people, because I'm right now mentoring someone who new into their career, 22 years of age. And when I look at them, like, I'm like 33 and I'm like, you have so much of your life ahead of you. And they're like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm freaking out. Like, I told them, I was like, listen, I tell the stories of, the person who invented Coca-Cola I mentioned you the Coca-Cola slushies. They were like 50, 55, right? Like, and I was like,
Could happen whenever.
Exactly. Like, and my younger brother reached out to me and he was like, James, I wish I had started sooner like you, because he was a pastor for 7 years of his life, and then realized he didn't want to be in the church anymore, and he wanted to make more money and provide for his family, and he wanted to go into tech. So I helped to rewrite his whole resume, because I knew how to convert the skills over to sales. And so now he's doing like sales at Cisco. But he's like, I wish I had started sooner. I would be, because he's only a year and a half younger than me. And he's like, I would be closer to where you are. And I was like, don't do that. Don't ever put timelines on yourself. Like, you are on your own journey. And
all of us are.
Man, I mean,
one of the cool things is that, like, you guys do this podcast. Why are you doing this podcast? It's same. Like, why? Well, you ask why? Because it fulfills you. You think people. I was talking to this wonderful doctor the other day who's thinking about a career shift.
Really?
Because medicine is challenging, tiring. And what I said is, I thought there were many. He was like, "Oh, I'm really interested in startups and new stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, you could be on advisory boards and do this, and you could then go into administration. You could go keep doing it." But what's neat about today,
You can make a hard shift, right?
you can
Or-
shift, and you can also
or still continue,
have
yeah.
little pieces.
Be a huge contribution to them. Like,
But you can you can run a business and do a podcast if that sort of floats your boat, and you can be on an advisory board in an area. So you can fill. I think people that sort of think, oh gosh, like I have, only one.
This path. Yeah.
I love that what you basically just said.
I don't think it is. I think the people that are happy are looking for ways, both through work, but also family, other ways to sort of find meaning in multiple ways.
I think that's it. Find meaning. That's what it is. And we had that discovery opportunity during COVID. For all of us, it became even more important.
There's no question that in tech, even though there's very low unemployment, I think there's more. Yes, I think there's more opportunities to hire people than there was, let's say, a year ago.
Again, it's that pendulum, right? It would become just the great attrition, the great resignation.
I think that is, and again, that's anecdotal because I know unemployment has remained very low, but it feels like in our sector specifically, to your point, I think we're seeing more ability for companies to hire people at.
The fact is, even those people that got laid off got great severances and are not filing for unemployment. So maybe that's why the data hasn't skewed.
Well, hold on. Not everyone got the great layoffs because,
No, I'm just
granted, there were, because startups couldn't give like 6 months of, paid severance, like the Microsofts and the Googles. Like I know so many people that were like, I want to get fired so I can then go figure out. And I will, like I said this, I want your take on this because I was very opinionated on this. And some people are like, no, this is what companies had to do. I agree that you had to lay off people, but my issue was the fact that you had to lay off so many it was a direct result of negligent hiring practices. I would be on so many different internal groups on Facebook for Microsoft, for all these other ones. I would say, I just joined and all I do is sit at my desk and I don't feel fulfilled. I'm not working on anything with purpose. And it's because, and I believe one of the biggest perpetrators of this was Mark Zuckerberg with Metaverse. And he's like, we're going to hire 40,000 people, right? And they did that announcement in like 2019, right? Pre-COVID. And all of a sudden everyone's like, me too, because it was like a talent grab. And now you're just giving the height of the offering letters were 2021. Serious, ridiculous packages. And then all of a sudden Microsoft hired 75,000 people in 3 years. Google hired 75,000. Salesforce doubled its workforce. Are you telling me your business was growing that much that you needed double sales, double HR, doubled? No.
And now actually they're acknowledging, Zuckerberg actually said it, that he's happy that we found focus again.
I agree, but it's like, here's what pissed me off. A lot of these people making that had MBAs, had the game theory, had all the right reason to tell you. And we knew our customers were facing a pinch coming up. And in 2020, when stuff was shutting down, it's not like we didn't know about the tailwinds. Our customers were the first ones facing the hurt. So that's why I got so pissed off about this. Is like,
what's your take, Greg?
Anyway, now you heard my Greg. Sorry.
Well, I think people make mistakes. I think whether it's Zuckerberg or Amazon or a lot of tech companies admit that they overhired, and there may have been rationale for it, but in retrospect, they look and they say that was a mistake.
I'm going to do some headlines. Startups face mass extinction event in 2023. 4 out of 5 early startups are at risk of wipeout, crash. It'll make 2008 look quaint.
I understand. I mean, I think there's I could make an argument for why that would happen, but I don't believe that's the most likely.
Do you think it's a
scenario.
consolidation versus a crash? Maybe they're pivoting. Maybe that's better.
I think there's a lot of money on the sidelines. There's still tremendous amount of venture capital and just uncommitted dollars. I think that a lot of these companies will pivot into areas that are more interesting if they weren't in some interesting areas. A lot of companies have more cash proceeds. They'll skinny down. So I don't think it will be like 2000. Do I think that there are a lot of companies that will go out of business? Absolutely. Do I think 4 out of 5 or this
It's too high.
This Armageddon? I think that's probably overstated.
You just brought up, you believe there's cash waiting to be unloaded. What are some areas, if you can share, that you think are places where people that are being untapped, that haven't been tapped into, that you think like, hey, like if someone spends some time and energy, there's some money that might come out here?
Is it a certain investment thesis, or is it a region?
Is it an industry? Is it technology? Because obviously everyone's all about generative AI, and literally the metaverse was last year, and it was blockchain and quantum, before that.
Well, I do think generative AI and AI is different than crypto, is different than metaverse.
Okay.
I think there's more real value to what AI is already doing at almost every company, technology or not. And I think there's so much more that it will do. So I don't put it in the same category as I do metaverse and crypto. Now, those may have interesting. I also believe ultimately VR and there'll be something there, and there may be something for decentralized monetization or blockchain. I think, but in terms of size of opportunity, I don't think there's anything close. And so I do think AI and generative AI are a game changer. The interesting question, I think, is who gets. So, and I think there will be a lot of value created from that. I think the more interesting question is who's going to capture that value. Is it going to be Microsoft with OpenAI, Google with its offerings? Amazon's going to come out with something, I think, interesting in this area. Facebook may.
They talked about their Llama. Those
companies, or is it going to be those companies and a bunch of startups? And my bet is that it's going to be the latter. So I am excited about what 10 years from now. Again, we talked about those co-pilots. That's an area where I'm spending a bunch of time.
So it's interesting. Sorry, just to add to that one, just as a little point there, that the platform players, that are startups that are going to do the last mile for every scenario, every use case, because a platform alone doesn't do it. But there's lots of development, testing, design, professional services opportunity around all of that too. So think about that, because none of this comes out of the box. There's so much work to be done. In fact, a lot of work to be done.
There's a lot of work to be done. And then there's a lot of verticalization. So, Microsoft and Google aren't going to build, something for that.
Yeah, that one niche case.
That for those sort of, and they're not even that nichey maybe
You're
too
right.
in the end.
You're
They
right.
could be, for the nurse who's sort of wanting the AI to help,
It takes time to train. That's specifically for that taxonomy and
And those models are very specific.
Yeah.
I'm excited about thinking about building ways to take advantage of
I love it.
this new technology.
I think we have a bit of a void here in our ecosystem, so I do want you to comment on that as well.
I'm very bullish on the future of venture capital and entrepreneurship. I'm biased, so take everything I say with the knowing that I'm in the middle of the muck here and biased. But if you believe, and I do, that engineering is at the heart of great startups, then you're long on Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. We have, second only to the Valley, and certainly on a per capita basis even more, the most talented engineering capability in the world.
No doubt, yeah.
And so if that's what you believe, if you believe that at the heart of these innovations, whether it be in generative AI or whatever comes next, and there'll be nexts as well, whatever comes in climate and solving, we've got big problems to solve. We've talked about some of them today: mental health, climate. We've got still very, very big, we've got political problems. I think technology will be part of helping to solve those problems.
As an enabler for sure.
And I think engineers will be at the heart of those solutions. And I think Seattle and this ecosystem has the best engineers along with the Valley in the world. And so I am extraordinarily bullish long-term on Seattle. Do I think that we'll go through some bumps? Of course, we're going to go through some bumps in the road. We're going through one right now. It's tough. It's tough to get funding. but there's just way too much world-class talent here to be anything other than, very excited about the future.
Greg, thank you for that. And I appreciate that the optimism and the coaching and encouragement there. And I can totally agree with you. I've met some of them being at a Google and a Microsoft, some of the most brilliant people, and even at IBM, right? Coming from New York to these companies, I've seen like they really appreciate the talent. They want to treat the talent well. And I met some of the brightest people I've ever met. And I also would tell people too, you don't need to be an engineer to be in a startup space. Because I think there's that connotation that I don't know how to code, so there's not a role for me. Can you talk to that quickly about that?
Oh, I think there's definitely a role. And if anything, I think, there's these no-code solutions. Some of this AI is going to enable people that have a passion and an interest in this to really participate. And that maybe it's not in writing code. It may be in the marketing side. It may be in the business,
the sales
customer
side.
discovery, customer development,
customer success,
and the finance side. All those things are critical to building great companies.
Greg, thank you so much for today and for sharing your insights and your perspectives on, as you mentioned, all those different topics from suicide, mental health, climate change, renewable energy, to like the ecosystems and how to get started in entrepreneurship. To sharing your passion in education and teaching to your superpower on multitasking. And I appreciate that. And I think it's fair to say we learned a lot from y'all, and I can't wait to break this up for people to take in the bite-sized courses and you to show your class. Any last comments for your listeners? Is an opportunity for you to share plugs, social media, your courses, things you got coming up. This floor is yours.
Well, thank you for this incredible setting. I love this this setup that you have. What a fun!
I didn't even know we're neighbors right here.
I know, and we're neighbors right across the street. Check out psl.com.
They're hiring. Their companies are hiring too.
Yes, so always looking for great people, and I just appreciate you too and what you do for our ecosystem. It's important, and I don't take it for granted, so thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any companies in particular? We talked about June, Evergreen, others that you'd like to highlight?
Oh, gosh.
I'm sure you'll upset the ones you don't mention. So,
well, for the Seattle folks that are going to be, we're launching a new vet clinic and reimagining the veterinary space. It's called needed. Felix and Fido. So if you're in the Seattle area or over on the east side and you have a pet, sign up. I'm signing up our dog, Jordy. I think it's going to be, I think that's an extraordinary new sort of way to
approach vets,
to approach caring for your...
So you're going to connect them, or is it more like a virtual visit or in-person visits, or what is it?
Yeah, it's it has a clinic, so you can do all the things you do at a clinic, but it's going to leverage technology, telehealth, in sort of home visits.
Nice.
It's just sort of rethinking if you were going to start from scratch and really thinking about what that vet experience should be, both for the pet parent as well as for the veterinarian. It's rethinking that, and it's exciting.
And
so
sometimes better for the pet itself, because they get stressed when they go to those actual clinics for the smallest things.
Yeah.
We're thinking about your animal and your loved one in a way that, to your point, like our dog shakes when she goes.
Yeah, same for Winston.
I think there's a better way.
Awesome.
Well, I love that. Well, again, Greg, thank you so much. We'll have people check out your LinkedIn. You might get a lot of new followers just because of this. So maybe people will attend to audit your class at UW if that's available. Feel free to follow us on all of our social medias. I'm your co-host, James Archeri.
I'm Sandy Sharma. Until next time.
Great one.
Thank you, Greg.